The Seattle rain drummed against our kitchen window as Eliza and I sat across from each other, steam rising from our coffee mugs between us. She hadn't touched hers. Her fingers were interlaced tightly, knuckles white with tension. "It's in Boston, James," she said finally. "The offer, it's at Mass General." I nodded slowly, absorbing what this meant. My wife, brilliant neurosurgeon Dr. Eliza Chen, had been shortlisted for a pioneering research position. We discussed the possibility, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Boston was 3,000 miles away from our life in Seattle, from our friends, from Tech Fusion, the startup I'd spent 5 years building from nothing into a promising mid-sized tech company. That's incredible," I managed, reaching across to cover her hands with mine. "When would they need you to start?" 3 months. Her dark eyes searched my face. "But I haven't accepted yet. This affects both of us. Your company is here. Everything we've built is here." I took a deep breath. Tech Fusion was my baby, an AI solutions provider that had finally found its footing after years of struggle. We had 42 employees now, a downtown office, and were finally turning consistent profits. Moving across the country would mean stepping back, becoming a remote CEO, or selling my stake entirely. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime, Liz," I said. "You've been working toward this since med school. So have you with Tech Fusion," she countered. "I'm not asking you to walk away from that." A heavy silence settled between us as rain continued to patter against the window. We'd been married 7 years, together for 10. We'd survived her grueling residency, the lean years when I maxed out credit cards to make payroll. We'd always been a team. "What if," I started, an idea forming, "what if we tried long distance for a while? You go to Boston, I stay here until we figure out Tech Fusion's next steps. It wouldn't be forever." She nodded slowly, relief and guilt warring on her face. "Are you sure? I know how hands-on you are with the company." I wasn't sure at all. I'd never imagined running Tech Fusion from anywhere but our Seattle headquarters, but I also knew what this research position meant to Eliza. Breakthrough work in neurological regeneration that could help thousands of patients. "I'm sure," I said with more confidence than I felt. "We'll make it work." That night, as Eliza slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling thinking about what this would mean. I'd need to restructure the leadership team, set up better remote work protocols, find someone to handle the day-to-day operations. Marcus, my COO, was brilliant but inexperienced. Diane in product development was innovative but struggled with deadlines. The board would have questions. I slipped out of bed and padded to my home office. The blue light of my laptop illuminated the room as I started drafting transition plans. If I was going to support Eliza's dream while protecting mine, I needed a solid strategy. The next 3 months passed in a blur. Eliza packed and arranged housing in Boston while I restructured Tech Fusion's operations. I promoted Marcus to Executive Vice President, giving him more decision-making authority. We implemented new communication systems, and I scheduled quarterly in-person visits to Seattle. The board was surprisingly supportive once I laid out my plan, though I caught the skeptical glances between some members. I understood their concerns. Founders who step back often see their companies veer off course. I was determined not to let that happen. The day we drove Eliza to SeaTac Airport arrived too quickly. Her parents had flown in from San Francisco to help with the move and would accompany her to Boston. Our goodbye at security was brief but intense. "This isn't goodbye," I whispered into her hair as we embraced. "It's just a new chapter. I love you," she said, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for this." I watched her disappear through security, wheeling her carry-on behind her, occasionally looking back to wave. Only when she was completely out of sight did I allow the weight of what we were doing to fully hit me. Back at our half-empty apartment, I opened my laptop to join the Monday morning executive meeting, my first as a remote CEO. The faces of my leadership team appeared on screen, all trying too hard to look normal. "Morning, everyone," I said, projecting confidence. "Let's get started." The first few weeks of our new arrangement were surprisingly smooth. Eliza was consumed with settling into her new role, and I threw myself into making remote leadership work. We video called nightly, exhausted but excited to share our days. The time difference meant I was starting my workday as she was finishing hers, which gave us a window to connect. Then came the Henderson contract. "They're insisting on meeting the CEO in person," Marcus told me during our weekly check-in. "They're old school that way. It's a $5 million deal, James." I checked my calendar. I had my first visit to Seattle scheduled in 3 weeks, but Henderson wanted to move forward immediately. "Book me on a red-eye," I told him. "I'll be there tomorrow." I texted Eliza. "Need to fly to Seattle for emergency meeting, rain check on dinner call tonight?" Her reply came an hour later. "Of course. Hospital keeping me late anyway. Safe travels. Love you." The Henderson meeting went well, but it highlighted a problem. Some aspects of my job couldn't be done remotely. I extended my stay to handle other face-to-face meetings, and one day turned into 5. When I finally returned to Boston, I found an apartment that felt less like home than I'd hoped. Eliza was working 80-hour weeks, often sleeping at the hospital. When she was home, she was either preparing for the next day or too exhausted to do more than collapse into bed. "I didn't think it would be this intense," she admitted one rare evening when we were both home and awake. "The research is groundbreaking, but the hours are brutal. It's always hardest at the beginning," I reassured her, remembering Tech Fusion's early days. "It'll get easier." But it didn't get easier. By month 2, we were like ships passing in the night. My board was increasingly requesting my presence in Seattle. Eliza was deep in her research. Our daily calls became every other day, then twice a week. The distance between us was growing in ways that couldn't be measured in miles. I was in Seattle for the 3rd time in 6 weeks when the call came. It was 3 a.m. in Boston, midnight in Seattle, and I knew immediately something was wrong. "James," Eliza's voice was tight, controlled in the way it got when she was holding back emotion. "There's been an accident at the lab." My blood ran cold. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine, but our primary test samples were contaminated. Months of work, gone. The team is devastated." I closed my eyes, hearing the exhaustion and defeat in her voice. "I'm so sorry, Liz. What happens now?" "We start over," she said simply. "There's no other option." "Do you need me there?" "I can be on the next flight." There was a pause. "No," she said finally. "I need to focus on rebuilding. Having you here would be a distraction." Her words stung, but I understood. Eliza had always tackled challenges by narrowing her focus, shutting out everything else, including, sometimes, me. "Okay," I said softly. "But I'm here if you change your mind." After we hung up, I stood at my hotel window overlooking the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle was lit up against the night sky, and below, the Tech Fusion office was visible, a few lights still on as the development team worked late. I realized I'd been in Seattle more than Boston over the past month. The company needed me here. My employees needed me. And Eliza, my brilliant, driven wife, was making it clear she needed space to solve her own problems. For the first time, I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., but I arrived at the Tech Fusion office at 7. The Seattle summer morning was unusually clear, sunlight streaming through the wall of windows in our reception area. I nodded to Kayla, our front desk manager, who looked surprised to see me so early. "Coffee's fresh," she offered as I passed. I grabbed a mug on my way to my office, settling behind my desk to review the presentation one last time. The numbers were good. Revenue up 18% year over year, client retention strong, 2 new enterprise clients onboarded. But there was a concerning trend in our development timeline. The Henderson integration was behind schedule, and our new AI analytics platform was showing troubling bugs in testing. My phone buzzed with a text from Eliza. "Good luck with the board today. Call after." I smiled, typing back, "Thanks. We'll call this evening." Our communication had improved slightly in the weeks since the lab accident. We'd established a more realistic calling schedule, and I'd started planning my Seattle trips to align with her hospital on-call rotations, when she'd be working overnight anyway. The boardroom filled gradually with the familiar faces of our investors and advisors. I shook hands, made small talk, poured coffee. When everyone was seated, I began my presentation. TechFusion has had a solid quarter, I started, clicking through my slides. Our financials remain strong, and client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. George Wayland, our lead investor, interrupted. "And yet the Henderson integration is 6 weeks behind. What's happening there, James?" I'd known this was coming. "We've encountered some integration challenges with their legacy systems. Marcus can speak to the technical details, but we've allocated additional resources and expect to be back on track within 3 weeks. Marcus jumped in with the specifics, as I'd briefed him to do. The board seemed satisfied with his explanation, but I noticed George making notes, his expression unreadable. After the meeting, George asked me to stay behind. "Walk with me, James," he said once we were alone, gesturing toward the door. We rode the elevator down in silence and emerged onto the busy downtown street. "I've been in this business for 30 years, George said as we walked. "I've backed dozens of startups, and I've developed a sense for when something's off." I waited, tension building in my chest. "You're stretched too thin," he continued. "The remote arrangement isn't working as well as you've been pretending it is." "The numbers," I started. "The numbers look good on paper," he cut in. "But anyone paying attention can see the cracks forming, the Henderson delay, the bugs in the new platform. The fact that you're here in Seattle more often than not, despite your claims about remote leadership." We stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. "I respect what you're trying to do for your wife," George said, more gently now. "But the board is concerned. TechFusion is at a critical growth stage. We need a full-time CEO, not someone with divided loyalties." The light changed, but I didn't move. "What exactly are you saying, George?" "I'm saying you have a choice to make. Either commit to TechFusion full-time here in Seattle, or step aside and let someone else take the company forward." My chest tightened. "You want me to resign?" "I want you to be realistic. Long-distance marriage or long-distance CEO, something has to give." We walked back to the office in silence, my mind racing. I'd always known this might happen, but facing it now felt like a punch to the gut. I'd founded TechFusion. It was my vision, my creation. The thought of handing it over to someone else was almost physically painful. Back in my office, I cancelled my afternoon meetings and closed the door. I needed to talk to Eliza, but it was the middle of her workday. I sent her a text instead. "Need to talk tonight. Important. Love you." Her response came hours later. "In surgery until late. Can we talk tomorrow?" I stared at my phone, frustration building. This was exactly the problem. We were living separate lives, making major decisions without each other. I typed back, "It's urgent. Please call when you're done, no matter how late." I worked until 9, then headed back to my hotel. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky as I sat on the edge of the bed waiting for Eliza's call. When my phone finally rang at 11:30 p.m., I answered immediately. "Hey." Her voice was tired but warm. "What's so urgent?" I took a deep breath. "The board wants me to choose. Either move back to Seattle permanently or step down as CEO." There was a long silence. "I see," she said finally. "And what are you thinking?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I founded this company. The thought of walking away," I trailed off, unable to finish. "And the thought of me walking away from my research?" she asked quietly. The question hung between us, heavy with implication. Neither option seemed possible. I couldn't ask Eliza to abandon her groundbreaking work, and I couldn't imagine surrendering TechFusion to someone else. "Maybe I can buy us more time," I suggested. "Convince the board to give the remote arrangement another quarter." "James," her voice was gentle but firm, "we both know that's just delaying the inevitable. This isn't working." Not for Tech Fusion, not for my research, and not for us. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying... I'm saying we need to be honest about where we are, she interrupted. We're living separate lives in separate cities. My work is here. Yours is there. Something has to change. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I don't want to lose you, Liz. I don't want to lose you either, she said, her voice breaking slightly. But I also don't want you to resent me for making you choose between me and the company you built. After we hung up, I sat in the dark hotel room for a long time. The choice before me seemed impossible. The company I'd built from nothing or the woman I loved. Either way, I stood to lose something irreplaceable. I was still awake at 5 a.m. when my phone rang again. Thinking it was Eliza calling back, I answered without checking the screen. James. It was Marcus, his voice tense. We have a situation. I sat up, instantly alert. What's happened? We've been hacked. It looks like a major data breach. Client information, proprietary algorithms, everything. My heart raced as I switched to speakerphone and reached for my laptop. How bad? Bad, Marcus confirmed. We've taken the systems offline, but preliminary assessment suggests they've been in our network for weeks. I'm on my way, I said, already pulling on clothes. Call the crisis team. Everyone in the office in 1 hour. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings, calls with cybersecurity experts and damage control. The breach was sophisticated and targeted, not random hackers, but likely corporate espionage. Our most valuable intellectual property had been compromised, along with sensitive client data. I worked straight through, fueled by adrenaline and coffee. The crisis team, Marcus, our head of security, legal counsel and PR director, set up camp in the conference room. We contacted affected clients, brought in external security consultants, and prepared statements for the press. Somewhere in the chaos, I texted Eliza, major security breach at Tech Fusion. All hands on deck, will call when I can. Her reply was immediate. Do what you need to do. I'm here when you need me. By day 3 of the crisis, the immediate fire was contained, but the damage was severe. We'd lost client trust, potentially valuable IP, and our stock was in freefall. The board called an emergency meeting. I hadn't slept in nearly 72 hours when I stood before them, presenting our response plan and recovery strategy. George Wayland's expression was grim as I finished. This is exactly what we were concerned about, he said. A crisis of this magnitude requires full leadership attention. Your divided focus left us vulnerable. That's not fair, I argued, exhaustion making me less diplomatic than usual. Our security protocols were top tier. This could have happened regardless of where I was based. Ooh, perhaps, another board member interjected, but your response might have been faster if you weren't constantly traveling between coasts. The meeting continued in this vein, with the board increasingly pointed in their criticism of my remote leadership. Finally, George cleared his throat. We've reached a decision, he announced. Tech Fusion needs stable on-site leadership to navigate this crisis. We're implementing the succession plan, effective immediately. I stared at him in disbelief. You're firing me? We're activating the emergency leadership provision in the company bylaws, George clarified. Marcus will step in as acting CEO while you take a temporary leave of absence. After the crisis is resolved, we can discuss your return. Assuming you're prepared to commit fully to Seattle. The room spun around me. This couldn't be happening. I'd founded Tech Fusion. I'd built it from nothing, mortgaged my house to make payroll in the early days, worked 80-hour weeks for years, and now they were pushing me out. You can't do this, I said, my voice barely controlled. I'm the founder. This is my company. It's a publicly traded company, George corrected gently, and as majority shareholders, we have a fiduciary duty to protect its interests. I'm sorry, James. The decision is made. I left the boardroom in a daze, ignoring the sympathetic glances from my executive team. In my office, I closed the door and finally called Eliza. They've suspended me, I said when she answered, the reality of it still sinking in. Temporarily, they say, but oh, James, she breathed. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, I admitted, the exhaustion and shock finally catching up to me. I feel like I've lost everything. Not everything, she said firmly. Never everything. Come home, James. Come to Boston. We'll figure this out together. Home. The word caught me off guard. Boston had never felt like home to me. It was just the place I occasionally slept between trips to Seattle. But Eliza was there, and maybe that was home enough for now. Okay, I said finally. I'll book a flight for tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, looking around the office I'd designed myself. The custom standing desk, the Seattle skyline photos I'd taken, the wall of framed milestones, our first client contract, our patent approval, the cover of Tech Innovator magazine with my face on it. Marcus knocked softly before entering. His expression was a complex mix of sympathy and discomfort. I didn't ask for this, he said immediately. I want you to know that. I nodded, too exhausted for anger. I know. You'll do fine, Marcus. The response plan is solid. Follow it and keep the board informed every step of the way. He hesitated. Will you be back? It was the question I'd been asking myself since leaving the boardroom. Did I want to come back to a company that could push me out so easily? Did I want to continue fighting a losing battle between my company and my marriage? I don't know, I answered honestly. I need some time to think. That night, as I packed up my hotel room, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I opened it to find TechFusion's stock had dropped another 15% on news of the leadership shakeup. At Bees, the article quoted an anonymous board member saying the change was necessary to stabilize the company during this critical period. I turned off my phone and finished packing. Tomorrow I would fly to Boston, to Eliza. Beyond that, I couldn't see. The Boston apartment felt different when I returned, less like a temporary space and more like a refuge. Eliza had taken a rare day off to meet me at the airport, and the relief in her eyes when she saw me made my throat tight with emotion. You look exhausted, she said, taking my bag as we walked to her car. I am, I admitted. 3 days of crisis management with minimal sleep had left me running on fumes. At home, she made me eat something before gently guiding me to bed. I slept for 14 hours straight, waking disoriented in the early morning light. Eliza was curled beside me, her breathing deep and even. I watched her sleep, struck by how long it had been since we'd simply been together like this. The next few days passed quietly. I ignored emails from TechFusion, let calls from board members go to voicemail. Instead, I focused on recovering, on being present with Eliza during her limited free time. We cooked together, walked along the Charles River, talked about everything except the decision looming over us. On my 4th day in Boston, Eliza came home from the hospital vibrating with excitement. We've had a breakthrough, she announced, dropping her bag and coat inside the door. The new approach is working. The cellular regeneration rates are beyond anything we expected. Her face was alight with the joy of scientific discovery. I couldn't help smiling in response, her excitement contagious. That's amazing, Liz. Tell me everything. Adi, we opened a bottle of wine as she explained the technical details of her research, most of it over my head. But I understood enough to appreciate the magnitude of what her team had accomplished. This could lead to treatments for previously irreversible nerve damage, potentially helping millions of patients. This is why you came to Boston, I said, raising my glass to her. You were right to take the position. Her smile faltered slightly. But at what cost? The question hung between us, unavoidable now. I set down my glass, knowing we couldn't delay this conversation any longer. I've been thinking, I started carefully, about TechFusion, about us, about what happens next. She nodded, waiting. The board made their position clear. They want a CEO in Seattle, fully committed to the company, and after the data breach, I can't entirely blame them. So you're going back, she said, her voice carefully neutral. No, I said. surprising myself with the certainty I felt. "I'm not." Her eyes widened. "James, let me finish," I said gently. "I built Tech Fusion from nothing. It's been my identity for so long that I couldn't imagine walking away. But these past few days, being here with you, I've realized something important." I reached across the table for her hand. "I don't want to run a company that can push me out the moment things get difficult. And I don't want to be in a marriage where we're living separate lives on opposite coasts." "What are you saying?" she asked, her fingers tightening around mine. "I'm saying I choose us," I answered simply. "I'll resign as CEO of Tech Fusion, negotiate to keep my board seat and equity stake, and find something new here in Boston." She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't let you give up everything you've built. That's too much to ask." "You're not asking," I pointed out. "I'm choosing. There are tech companies in Boston. I have skills, experience, connections. I can consult or join another startup, or maybe even start something new eventually. But what I can't do is live without you." "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Really sure?" I was. The realization had been building since the board meeting, crystallizing during my quiet days in Boston. Tech Fusion had been my dream, my creation, but it had also become a publicly traded company with a board that could and did make decisions without me. It wasn't truly mine anymore and hadn't been for some time. "I'm sure," I told her. "It's time for a new chapter." The next morning, I called George Wayland and requested a video meeting with the full board. 2 hours later, I sat at our kitchen table, laptop open, as their faces appeared on screen. "I've made my decision," I told them without preamble. "I'm resigning as CEO of Tech Fusion, effective immediately." There were murmurs of surprise. Even George looked taken aback. "This isn't what we wanted, James," he said. "We were hoping for a compromise." "I understand," I replied. "But this is what's best for me, for my marriage, and ultimately for Tech Fusion. Marcus is more than capable of leading the company through this crisis and beyond." We spent the next hour discussing transition details. I would retain my board seat and equity stake. I would be available as an advisor for 6 months to ensure a smooth handover. The company would announce my departure as a planned succession, not a forced removal. After the call ended, I sat quietly at the table, processing what I'd just done. There was sadness, certainly. Tech Fusion had been my life's work. But underneath the sadness was something unexpected. Relief. Eliza found me there when she came home from the hospital. "How did it go?" she asked cautiously. "It's done," I said. "I'm officially the former CEO of Tech Fusion." She sat beside me, taking my hand. "How do you feel?" I considered the question. "Lighter," I said finally, "like I've set down something very heavy that I've been carrying for a long time." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "we start over. Together." 6 months later, I stood in the sleek lobby of Neuralith, a Boston-based biotech startup specializing in AI applications for medical research. My meeting with their CEO had gone well. They were interested in bringing me on as Chief Strategy Officer, overseeing their expansion into new markets. As I waited for the elevator, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Tech Fusion stock had hit an all-time high following the successful launch of their new AI platform, the one that had been plagued with bugs before my departure. Marcus had done well, steering the company through the crisis and beyond. I felt a surprising lack of jealousy at the news. Instead, there was a quiet pride. I'd built something strong enough to survive without me. That was its own kind of success. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Eliza. "Dinner with Dr. Patel and his wife tonight at 7. Don't forget." Dr. Patel was the head of neurosurgery at Mass General and Eliza's mentor. His wife ran one of Boston's most successful venture capital firms. It was a strategic dinner. Eliza's research was moving toward clinical trials, and they needed investors who understood both the science and the market potential. I texted back, looking forward to it. Neuralith meeting went well. Details tonight. As I left the building and stepped into the Boston afternoon, I was struck by how much had changed in 6 months. I'd gone from CEO of a growing tech company to job hunting in a new city. I traded Seattle's familiar skyline for Boston's historic architecture. I'd given up daily control of a company I'd built from scratch, and yet I didn't regret it. Eliza and I were truly together again, building a life in the same city, supporting each other's careers without impossible compromises. I was exploring new professional opportunities that excited me. We were talking about starting a family, something that had seemed impossible during our coast-to-coast existence. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. Sometimes supporting someone else's dream means reimagining your own. Sometimes becoming CEO overnight isn't as important as becoming a better partner every day. As I hailed a cab to take me home, I smiled to myself. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was turning out to be the one I needed. The cab pulled away from the curb, carrying me through the streets of Boston, a city that somehow had become home.